what Matthew was doing. He was a tax collector, franchised out by Rome. They would have the highest bidder would get the opportunity to be in a certain area, the tax collector. And Zacchaeus was it in another area, down by Jericho. And Zacchaeus was it in this particular area, or Matthew was it in this particular area. And here Jesus is looking for fishers of men. Who would have thought that he would stop at a tax collector booth and pick out Matthew? If I was Matthew, and Matthew wrote this gospel we're looking into, I would have let this start my writing. He has spent 8 chapters before he finally tells us his own story and how he actually became the writer of this particular gospel. But here Jesus is picking him out of a tax collector booth. Talk about shopping at the bottom shelf at the supermarket. Reaching low as you can go. You know, marketing has the things that are the best selling in a supermarket at eye level. Well, a tax collector would be at the very, very bottom. These guys, again, they work for Rome. They could be loan agents, and they would loan you money, loan sharks for 50%. They could stop you at any time they wanted to, go through your belongings and tax you for this and for that. They had all these different kinds of tax. They'd have a poll tax. And a poll tax, basically, when you were 12 years old as a girl till 65 or your death, 14 as a boy, they could tax you just for breathing air that belonged to Rome. Just for being alive. You would get taxed. You have an income tax that would be 1% of what you might have earned during that year. You'd have wheel taxes or road taxes where they would tax you per wheel on whatever you were using to transport. They'd tax you per fish. They would just tax you in all these different ways. So tax collectors were hated. Whatever they could earn above what they agreed to with Rome, they got to keep. And so they would exploit people. They may owe Rome $2 on something, they'd charge you $3. And they would keep that dollar for themselves. And so they became very wealthy, but they were very hated. They could not go into synagogues. The priests or Jewish religious leaders said that there was no redemption for them, that what they were doing was an unpardonable sin. So they were seen as treacherous. They were below prostitutes on the social ladder scale. But everybody hated them. Even Rome hated them because they were Jews. Jews hated them because they were traitors, and they were considered corrupt, and that they would tax you for anything. And you're right, Roger, we're talking about our day too. I mean, just look at wherever you're getting hit with taxes. On your cell phone, on fuel bills, on television, cable, anything that you're having any kind of transaction with, here comes the tax. We don't like it. I have met many people that have a sign in their front yard, "I love my IRS agent." I mean, it just rubs all of us. And especially if they are collecting for a foreign government. That they are Putin in the offering for Russia. Putin's a ruler there. Y'all got that? Okay. We would hate that. And yet that's exactly who Matthew was. And just imagine Jesus' other disciples that were following him. And imagine Matthew as Jesus walks right up to that booth. It says in verse 9, as Jesus went on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting in a tax collector's booth. And he said to him, "Follow me." And Matthew got up and followed him. Most of us would have been afraid because Matthew was like a mafia. He had the Roman soldiers guarding him, and at his bidding, they would go deal with you if you, in his estimation, were not appropriately dealing with your tax responsibility. His name all through his gospel is Matthew. But if you go to Mark, You go to Luke, they initially call him Levi, and they don't change his name to Matthew until he is named among the disciples. But Matthew never wanted to be called Levi again. And so all through his gospel, he calls himself Matthew. And in Luke, it says that when Jesus came up, that he saw a tax collector named Levi. Matthew says Jesus saw a man. A man. Because no matter what you do, in the eyes of God, as he looks at our lives, he sees a man, a woman, not what we do. He sees somebody who needs redemption. Now, his name being Levi suggests that he was from a priestly background. To us, that would mean that he was raised in the church. And for whatever reason, he rebelled against that being raised in the church. And now he is operating in the farthest thing from a church. I mean, you don't get much farther away than the priestly responsibilities than a tax collector. So whatever was going on in his life, he moved far away from the church. But he shows that he had this background in Scripture, because he quoted the Old Testament more than anybody. 99 times he quotes the Old Testament. 38 times he used the word fulfilled. That what was happening fulfilled something from the Old Testament. And he uses the word hypocrisy more than the rest of the Bible put together. Kind of puts together a circumstantial case of what had happened in Matthew's past to drive him so far from his birth calling, and yet he had all of this, obviously being trained as a child, as a young person, that had been put into him. And when he finally came back, not into priestly Jewish religious hypocrisy, but into a real relationship with the Son of God, all of that had been put in him was now focused in the right way. You know, we have a Matthew as well. And the reason his name is Matthew, his first name is George. And his first name is George because he was our first child that was born after my father, who was George, passed away. But then he almost didn't make it through pregnancy. Lynn went on total bed rest, and I had to do everything and work, 2 jobs, pastor a church, drive a school bus, go to seminary, and take care of the kids, cook all the meals, and just had to survive that moment of our life. But finally, it came down to the birth time, and he almost didn't make it through birth. He almost didn't make it through birth. The placenta broke loose before he got loose, and so he was struggling, smothering, and so it was a very scary moment. And so because of that, we named him Matthew, because Matthew means gift of God. Gift of God. Because if God would have wanted him, he could have took him. He had lots of opportunities, and yet he survived all of that. Now in Luke, it says that he saw Levi sitting at the tax booth, said to him, "Follow me." Luke adds this, and he left everything behind and began to follow him. For some reason, Matthew didn't say that of himself, but Luke did. Maybe the humility of Matthew, but Luke said, because looking at a tax collector and all of the wealth and all of the power, you leave a lot. From the outside looking in, you leave a lot behind. Now, Matthew obviously had some previous knowledge of Jesus. Here he is in Capernaum, and all these miracles have happened, and Jesus is teaching the Sermon on the Mount. All of this is unfolded. The paralytic, where they opened the roof. And Matthew must have been very focused on these things happening. And he's been guarded by Roman soldiers, so the healing of the centurion's servant must have been talked about. Must have been known. The Roman guards probably worked for that centurion. He had all of this, and God was working on his heart, but he's probably thinking God would never use I am so far, God would never use a person like me. There's no way that anything like that could happen, because God, if he's anything like those Jewish leaders had led him to believe, then he's probably got a horrible opinion of me, just like everybody around here does. You know, Jesus looks past the past and reaches into the present and offers us this wonderful future. And when he approached Matthew focused on the call that was being given to him, follow me. And then his willingness to walk away from whatever he had accumulated in life, he left everything. He had his own personal little rapture left behind. Somebody probably walked by the booth and said, well, where's the guy? All of his stuff's still here. He wasn't coming back. He left everything behind. You know, where were you when Jesus called you? And what did you leave behind? What did you leave behind? Faith is the fuel of Christianity. And there are a lot of people running on empty tanks. The fuel light has been on for years because you haven't lived by that kind of faith, where you leave everything behind. You know, over 41 years ago, 40 and a half years ago, God came to me and said, follow me. I cried out to Jesus, and I've shared testimonies over 4 years I've been here. But I was in a luxurious corner room in the athletic dormitory at Oklahoma State University. People coveted those corner rooms in the dorm. And I just cried out that night to God because I had really messed my life up. And I said, God, if you've got a better way, I am ready to take it now. And peace just flooded in. Crazy peace. And I immediately knew what I needed to do. And so I began dismantling my life. The next day I saw my coach on the athletic team, and I left my scholarship, full scholarship. And full scholarship meant nicest dorm on the campus, best food. You didn't get dorm food. You got training table food. School paid for. Told him I'm going. Where are you going? I don't know. I don't know where I'm going. But I started leaving everything behind. And beyond that, Lynn, close your ears right now. I had to take a trip over to a sorority and put an official end to a 2.5-year relationship and walk away. You know, in that moment, that young lady wasn't that interested in a college dropout, which was what I looked like. But a few years later, she changed her mind, but by that time I had finished a bachelor's and was working on a master's. But I had also already found this wonderful woman that I was going to spend the rest of my life with. But I didn't realize that faith became a template in my life that was going to repeat itself and continue to repeat itself as long as God gives me breath. But 3 years later, after being a sponge for 3 years of just absorbing everything, being at the church every moment it was open, serving every opportunity that I had in every aspect that I thought I could, other than public speaking, I packed my car with everything I owned in the world and headed off to California to work on a master's. It wasn't about 3 months there, and I've shared this before, that I realized that I needed more of an education than I thought. And God compelled me to take any kind of resources that I had, which was the equivalent of 2 Honda mid-sized cars, write a check, get rid of it. God, I'm trusting you. Teach me what it means to follow you. And God started just pouring jobs out. And one of those jobs, I met Lynn. And, 6 kids later, here we are. But this leaving everything behind. In 1986, we had gone out to Virginia. And I told Lynn, we need to start packing. We'd been out there a while. I just feel like God's going to move us. And so we prayed about it, and we prayed because Lynn was pregnant. It seems like every time we have a child, and I think we're safe here. But every time we have a child, that God would move us, all except for one, I figured out. And she was like 8 months pregnant or 7 months pregnant with our second child, which is Katie, our daughter. And we prayed that, Josh had been 8 days late, and so Katie was due in early December, and so we prayed that she would come 2 weeks early in November, and that would be a sign that this is exactly what God was directing us to do. And Lynn went into labor on Thanksgiving that particular year of 1986, and so that is confirmed. And then we had the owner of the house that we were renting show up the next week and say, by the way, I'm selling the house. You need to get out. Well, okay, a little exclamation point on that. And so again, by faith, we left everything, not having any kind of job ahead of us. Nothing ahead of us. Just trusting God. 3.5 years, which would be the last 3.5 years of my father's life. I didn't know it at the time. And I got to spend those 3.5 years with him. I told Lynn again we need to start packing. I put a for sale sign out in the yard. And we just had a brand new baby. Shiloh was born. And my father said, if you try to leave, go up and finish your education up in Kansas City, you'll starve. You'll starve. You got 3 kids. You got a wife. You're not going to make it. And I thought, God, I cannot go without my father's blessing. And I prayed that God would change my father's heart. I didn't realize it was going to be me in the hospital with a horrendous kidney stone that would probably be the catalyst to turn him to say, you need to go do what makes you happy. I'm going to help you do that. And so 3 kids, no jobs, no church. Off we went to Kansas City, Missouri from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And God provided the jobs immediately and a church that we were at for 2.5 years until I finished seminary. Just a precious church that embraced us and helped us to grow. But again, just leaving everything behind and trusting God. Even coming here was a big act of faith. Walking away from a large church. Lots of benefits. Lots of retirement and health care, life insurance, just everything you could imagine provided. But God eventually said, you need to do it, and then gave me this uncanny dream. After that, I called Josh and said, Josh, I know it's been 6 months since I first said no, and it's been 2 other no's. Are y'all still looking? And November 13th, we finally put it together after that trip to China. But 25 years driving old cars, no savings, not thousands in bank accounts, hundreds, sometimes under 100, but God always kept us going, no matter if we had 3 kids, 4 kids, 5 kids, 6 kids. He kept us going. But I always look back at that decision back in 1982 to give everything away to God, to leave everything behind, and to put myself in His hands for life, retirement, all those things. God, that's your problem. My problem was to follow you and leave everything behind. Have you done that in your life? Where are the signs of that? See, Matthew cannot go back. Peter went back fishing. Peter got to bring some of his friends along. Matthew lost all of his friends. He couldn't take a break from his job as a tax collector and come back. You're done, Matthew. No more job for you. He, more than any disciple, walked away. And that's why Luke probably said, you got to know this, people. But the freest people are the ones who have learned to leave things behind. In Hebrews chapter 12, it says, therefore let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us. Run with endurance the race that sets before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher. The author, follow me. Finisher, well done, good and faithful servant. The way I look at that, that's kind of a little parameter, brackets. That he's not in charge of it all. Everything in between. Second birth and final death. It all belongs to him. Jonathan Cahn said this. He said, you must relinquish your ownership. But it is in that relinquishing that you open yourself up to a miracle. It is only what you don't have that you can receive from God. And if you don't have anything, then God can bless you with everything. Then the possessions you once took for granted are freed up to undergo a transformation, to be turned into blessings given and blessings received from heaven. For when you take no blessing for granted, then everything in your life is transformed into a gift. Learn the power and the blessings that come in the letting go. It is then that your life will be filled with miracles and blessings. Matthew got on that road. Levi got on that road. Him, above all of them, left everything and was truly following Jesus Christ. But what do you do when you make this kind of transformation? Well, you got to let your friends know. It says in verse 10, then it happened that as Jesus was reclining at the table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were all dining with Jesus and his disciples. Now that sounds like a fun party. Tax collectors and sinners. Mark 2 says, many tax collectors and sinners were dining with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many of them, and they were following him. They're trying to figure this out too now. And Luke 5 says, and Levi, Matthew, gave a big reception for him in the house. So this is Meet Jesus Day. Imagine if you're a party animal. Parties at Matthew's house. Let's go. You walk in, there's Billy Graham. What are you thinking, Matthew? Matthew's saying, Billy G's in the house. I need you to meet him. Here's Jesus having dinner with a sinful crowd. You know, there's something unique about being a brand new Christian, because a brand new Christian still has his old lost friends. He hadn't had time to swap them out for his church friends. And so he's in that little zone where he still has the lost friends surrounding him. And he takes advantage of that. And he invites them to come and meet Jesus. In his mind, he's thinking, if Jesus would be okay with a person like me, he'll be okay with that scoundrel, that sinner. J.C. Ryle, an old preacher guy, he says, skunks don't know they stink. And they don't stink to one another. Sinners don't know they smell like sin. And they don't smell like sin to one another. Jesus said he came to seek and save sinners. Now he's hit the mother lode. They're everywhere. We try to avoid them. Jesus went right into the mix. Well, everybody knows this can only turn out bad when you got religious folks around. You know, the sour lemon society that followed Jesus everywhere. And you would think Jesus would see that his major ministry mistake was reaching out to people and forgetting that these people didn't measure up to the religious group's expectations. So verse 11, the Pharisees saw this. And they said to his disciples, why is your teacher eating with tax collectors and sinners? Luke 5 says that the scribes and the Pharisees began grumbling. And they grumbled not at Jesus, they grumbled at his disciples. That's an easier, softer target to gossip and talk to. Why do you eat and drink with the tax collectors and sinners. So, eating was a big deal in that culture. They didn't have a sliced bread. You couldn't go down and get Wonder or whatever the brands are, a sliced bread. You had a loaf. And everybody would participate in eating that loaf. And in their mind, if you took a part of that bread, you were one body together. You were one body together because you participated in that one loaf. Because it was, in a sense, a body of fellowship. That's why it makes complete sense that Jesus said, "This is my body, broken for you." Because they saw a loaf of bread as a unifying body, that to eat would be participation of acceptance of those that you ate that loaf with. It says Jesus was there, not just eating, but he was reclining. How can you get that comfortable? If you're around sinners, you should be uncomfortable. Jesus relaxed, getting comfortable. Pharisees were, head on a swivel. Look at that sin. Look at that sin. I've seen that guy. I know that guy. When Jesus heard this, he said to the Pharisees, "It's not those who are healthy who need a physician, but those who are sick." It's added elsewhere in one of the other Gospels, it's not those who are healthy who need to be... Oh, that's not in the Gospel. It's not those who are healthy who need to be locked down, but those who are sick. I don't know where that came from. Luke adds, that's our rendition, modern translation. Luke adds, "I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." So he clarified what it meant, those who are healthy versus those who are sick. Doctors don't make house calls on healthy people. You just don't do that. Just imagine a guy that went through medical school and residency and all that stuff, and then he figures out, I don't like sick people. I don't like disease. We look at a pandemic of virus. We've got a mandemic of sin all around us. And here you have Jesus. He's not avoiding, but he's running right into the mix of those who are afflicted, struggling with sin. And the Pharisees don't like that. You ask the question, am I a Pharisee? Well, the good way to answer that question is, how do you deal with lost people? How do you deal with lost people? That's a good way to determine. Church people can get boring. I didn't mean to say that out loud, but they can get boring. Lost people can be refreshing. They're pretty out there. They're actually willing to debate because they know more about their lostness than most church people know about their savedness. And you can't get a good dialogue about what it means to be a Christian from most people who say they're Christians. But lost people, they can tell you how to be lost. Oh, this website, this bar, oh, that group of people, they meet there every week. Let's go. They're good at it. And Pharisee doesn't like that. What are the evidences of being a Pharisee? Well, allowing your religious past to control your present expectations of others. Everybody's got to be like me. God has no variety. Even though we all look different, God can't have any variety in what religious expectations are to be. Limiting the ways of God, ways God can do things and still be about Jesus Christ. We forget, as long as it's about Jesus Christ and it is consistent with the Word of God, we need to watch what God's doing and maybe get excited about some things. And another is that you're not able to identify your own sickness. You're oblivious. This thing we're going through, I've been on this planet 60 years, been through a lot of different epidemics, whatever you want to call certain things. I don't know. Maybe I just didn't pay attention. But the asymptomatic stuff, that's new to me. I'm walking around, I'm sick. I don't know it. Whenever I got sick with the flu in the past, I said, I'm going to the bed. I'll see you in 3 days. I know I'm sick. These Pharisees didn't know they were sick. They didn't know how to determine the symptoms of their sickness. They didn't know what symptoms to look for, because they were just full into the disease itself. They didn't know the symptoms of pride and criticism and condemnation, and all those things were symptoms of lostness, of being far from God instead of being close to God. In fact, the Jewish leaders thought they were models of what God wanted in people. That's why Saul did what he did before he became Paul. He thought he was doing everything right. This is exactly what God wants me to do, persecute the church. If true health was defined by being most like Jesus, the Pharisees were sick. They were sick because they were constantly in confrontation with what Jesus was doing. And sick people are everywhere today. And sick people are everywhere in this situation. The sinners, tax collectors, the Pharisees. They were all there, but they just weren't willing to acknowledge it. I read about a guy named Eugene Fields. He was a newspaper reporter in Chicago. And he wrote in his column, "Half the aldermen in the city are crooks." Well, the mayor was offended. And so he demanded a retraction. And so Eugene Fields the next day wrote, "Half the aldermen in the city are not crooks." There's a retraction. A guy named Bob Pierce of World Vision, he said, "Let my heart be broken by the things that break the heart of God." And the Pharisees' hearts were not broken. All they cared about was their traditions, their religious expectations. They didn't care about the hurting, the lost. And Jesus tells them that they need to go and learn. It says in verse 3, "Go and learn what this means. I desire compassion and not sacrifice, for I did not come to call the righteous but sinners." Go and learn was a common phrase that the Pharisees, the rabbis, would use. Somebody would ask a question, he'd say, "Go and learn. Go and learn." So this just wasn't a happenstance phrase. What it meant was, you don't know enough right now. You need to go and learn some things, which would be a huge slap in the face to these religious leaders who thought they knew everything. And that, that comes from Hosea. And in the time of Hosea, where the quote comes from, that that I don't want sacrifice, I want mercy or compassion, that comes from a time when God is speaking through Hosea, whom God had told him to go marry a prostitute and have children with her, and name the children things like, "That's not mine," and then separate from her, and then go back and remarry her again to show that God was loving his adulterous people, Israel. But Israel at that time, the reason this particular phrase, that I desire compassion rather than sacrifice, is they had just gotten in the routine of doing anything they wanted to do. Any kind of behavior, anything like the world. And then, it's feast day. I need to go and make sacrifice. They bring a goat, they bring a lamb, and they'd have their sacrifice, and they go back and do the same thing. And God is saying, that means nothing to me. You just go through your religious routine. You think you can go do anything you want all week and then just show up on church on Sunday? Okay, God, we're good. Box checked. That's what they were doing in Hosea's day. Jesus says that is disease. That is sickness. I did not come to save those who think that they are okay just because they do certain things like that. Jesus turned a man who took from people and changed his name to a gift from God to you. Instead of taking, instead of taking like Levi, he became Matthew to give. To give. This traitor would be the one took from his own people, but now he would be the one to write the good news to his own people. The Gospel of Matthew is basically a gospel to the Jews. That's why there's so much Old Testament that is in it. Just imagine a world without the Gospel of Matthew, a world without the Sermon on the Mount. We have that because of Matthew. And Matthew was motivated to reach into the hearts of the same ones whose pockets he had reached into for all those years. He ended up going to Ethiopia and dying after preaching a sermon. He was stabbed. Matthew taught us, remember this, Jesus didn't die to make good people religious, but bad people righteous. Jesus didn't die to make good people religious, but bad people righteous. Matthew left, a bad person, left his job, his home, his friends, and even his name. He left everything behind and put himself in God's hands. Well, let me close by sharing with you a guy named Jim Dennison. Years ago, when he was younger, he went on a ministry trip into Malaysia. And in Malaysia, he went into a church, and that morning, a young teenage girl gave her life to Christ. And that same morning, that young girl was baptized. And he said after the service, he noticed that there was a lot of luggage that was accumulated in a corner in the church, and he asked the pastor, "Why is all that luggage there?" And the pastor said this. He said, "Well, that belongs to that teenage girl. Her father told her that if she became a Christian, never come back home again." She left everything. A modern day demonstration of it. What have you left? What have you left? Are you the same person that Jesus found in the booth, in the school? Are you the same person? Or are you so radically different you don't even carry the same name around? You won't even call yourself by that old name. That's the difference that Jesus wants to make in all of our lives. Matthew is just one of many of us in God's will. He wants all of us to have that radical a transformation. Let's pray.